Word on the grapevine is that there are nerfs coming. So I wanted to make a quick video to go through the cards in Marvel Snap that I think are maybe the strongest and maybe also the weakest, and say or suggest maybe how I would change them to try to improve the meta in the game. The meta in Marvel Snap is in a weird place at the moment because really it's still only forming. Players are only starting to reach pool 3 now, or players have only started to reach pool 3 a week or two ago, which ultimately is really early stages of pool 3. It takes months to get the full collection. So for the vast majority of players, they're not going to have full collections for a while. So talking about the meta is a sort of weird concept because players are sort of playing with different pool 3 cards and building their collection together bit by bit. And some players are going to have cards that are stronger than others. It's just the way that it is. That's the way that Marvel Snap works. So I guess it's players that are able to just dominate using only like 1 or 2 pool 3 cards are the ones that are going to really be able to get the advantage here. And it's those cards, if they are particularly strong, that could do with getting nerfed. So with all of that being said, I'm going to go through the cards that I think are weakest and cards that I think are strongest. Now, when I talk about cards that I think are weakest, I think a big thing there is when you open a card and the gut reaction is, oh, I'm disappointed that I've unlocked this card. So I'm going to keep that in mind as we move forward. But I'll go through in order. I've got the cards organized in order of energy here. So Yellow Jacket's pretty weak. I don't think I've ever seen anyone play this in their deck, ever. The downside of afflicting your other cards at this location with -1 power is just too severe. One of the main uses of Wasp is playing it with Lockjaw. I'm going to just bring up Lockjaw so you can see what the card does. One of the big uses of Wasp is playing it with Lockjaw. So you play the 0 energy card Wasp and then it jumps into the deck and gets replaced by another card. But like if you're playing Yellow Jacket, then you're actually decreasing the power of your other cards. So I feel like in order for this card to be even remotely playable, it would have to be at least 3 power. Because even then, even if you're playing it for 3 power with 0 energy, it's still got a downside, right? You still can't really play it. You can't really squeeze it in at the end of your final turn for that extra bump because you're going to be bumping down your other cards. So the only real use of Yellow Jacket is to play it as the first card in a location. And with 2 power, like it's not a huge benefit. So yeah, like Yellow Jacket I think could do with a buff. I'd make it at least 3 power. Hood is very strong. But in a Killmonger meta, which is the one we're in right now, it's not it's not quite as problematic as I feel like it could be if Killmonger wasn't as prevalent. So Hood's fine. I think there are other cards in the sort of Hood, Deadpool, Death archetype that could do with enough. I'll get to those soon. So scrolling down, nothing is jumping out as crazy weak to me. Angel's a little weak. Again, I'd maybe buff Angel up to 3 power. I don't think I've ever thought that Angel was good, even back in pool 1. Like having a 2 power card to jump out of your deck, yeah, it's sort of deck thinning and card draw, but like it's also so inconsistent. Like if you start with Angel in your opening hand, you just feel awful. I would personally, I think just giving him a slight nudge extra power, like 1 extra power would be good. All of this is fine. There are pretty good uses for all of these cards. Human Torch, would be strong in a world where Killmonger wasn't as prevalent, but I don't think that buffing every 1-drop because of Killmonger is a smart thing to do. So this is all fine. Quinjet is a little weak. The reason Quinjet is weak is because the game is so short and it doesn't feel like you have that long to take advantage of Quinjet. So what I mean by that is you play Quinjet and then you play other cards that add other cards to your hand. So like say you play Quinjet on 1, Cable on 2, then you finally on turn 3 get to play a card that is discounted. And it's just a little slow. For Marvel Snap, a game where you only get 6 turns, Quinjet just doesn't feel like it does enough quickly enough. But I really don't know how you fix that. Maybe cards that didn't start in your deck should cost 2 less. Maybe Quinjet should cost 2, and cards that didn't start in your deck should cost 2 less. Because then, yeah, you'd have to play it a turn later, but it would be more impactful and maybe worth adding in. I think maybe that is the buff that I would do on Quinjet. Uatu sucks, but that's kind of fine. It's a pool 1 card, and it's just to teach you the game. These cards are all seeming pretty good. Oh, Angela needs a nerf, right? Like I don't think no one should really be under the perception that Angela is a balanced fair card at this point. I think that it has been meta in pool 1, pool 2, and pool 3 for long enough for it to be like, okay, let's calm her down a bit. I wouldn't nerf her as hard as Bishop was nerfed. Well, actually, no. What am I talking about? Bishop was only nerfed down to 1 power. That's fine. what I want to say, I wouldn't nerf her as badly as the Collector was nerfed. So for those of you that don't know, Collector used to be every time you draw a card not from your deck, you'd gain 2 power, and now it's 1 power, right? So Angela, I think, should be nerfed, but not like as severely as that. I would maybe have her start on 0. I'd maybe make her a 2 energy 0 power card. Maybe -1, because at the end of the day, she's currently a 2 energy card that consistently easily gets up to 7 power. There's not really anything stopping her from doing that. It's quite easy if you're playing Angela to get her up to 7 every time without fail. 9 if you're playing Nightcrawler or Iron Fist or Green Goblin or you know, a card that gets played there and then moves. Yeah, Angela needs to at least be nerfed down to 0 power. I think that would maybe be a good like little nudge in power for now, and then like push her further if need be. Black Widow's got its uses. Psycholog's got its uses. Carnage is fine. Goose is fine. Mojo is strong, but like not like dominant. Mojo's probably one of the best 2-drops in the game, by the way, because Mojo is 8 power, but it is relying on your opponent and you both acting in a certain way. So I think what's so beautiful about Mojo is that, say you're winning, you and your opponent have both got 3 cards at a location. You can play Mojo as your 4th, and like if that 2 power is enough to win you the location now, that's great. But it's also your opponent that knows, okay, if I put another card here though to try and overtake, then your power gets boosted even more, so you have to be very careful about that. So Mojo's, I think, in a really good spot. It's powerful, but it's not dominant. I feel like Okoye is too weak, but this is a really hard one because she has been nerfed. She's been nerfed twice already because she used to be too strong, or she was nerfed and then sort of buffed. I think it used to be give every card in your deck +2 power, which was too much. I think maybe it's just the thing with the design of the card is that it's difficult to balance this one correctly without being too strong or too weak. So I think maybe there's not much that can be done about Okoye. Going through, I really feel like a lot of the cards in Marvel Snap are in a pretty good spot at the moment. Viper's a little weak, but I don't think that's a case of the card itself being weak, but maybe there's just not enough synergy with her. There's not enough cards like Hood or like Electro that you can play her with. I don't think the card itself is flawed. I think there just needs to be more cards that are synergistic with her. So I don't think a nerf or a buff is in order. The only buff Mysterio needs is when you have a really cool variant for Mysterio like me, that variant, it would be great if that was actually shown in game, because it isn't. The way Mysterio works is it gets replaced by this version all the time. And that's just a bit of a disappointment. Like, it's a shame all 3 can't look like the variant rather than all 3 switching to the original version. Okay, so Mystique, I guess. Mystique and Onslaught is like the combo that is most problematic at the moment, because it drives decks like Patriot, no ability, insane. Although I don't think it's too strong. I think it's just really annoying for people. I think the best nerf for the Mystique and Onslaught stuff would be less nerfing these cards and more buffing Enchantress and making Enchantress, say, ongoing effects, make Enchantress's effect ongoing and have it be other ongoing abilities at this location are inactive, rather than, because then it's difficult when your opponent is going to, on the final turn, play Mystique Patriot, and you can't really do anything about that. So, but I think Mystique and Patriot themselves are fine. I've heard people talking about how Gambit could do with a buff, which I can get that, because it is an issue with Gambit where when your opponent's got armor or Professor X or whatever, Gambit can still target cards that can't be destroyed. It just won't destroy them, which is a shame. I do agree with the stance that Gambit should only even attempt to destroy cards that can be destroyed, and then maybe that would be fairer, because there's a lot of armor and Professor X in the meta at the moment. These cards all seem pretty good. Wolfsbane is very strong, but that's fine. It's not as dominating in pool 3. Okay. I'm going to have a video coming out about Electro soon, but in my opinion right now, Electro is really, really weak. And I don't know what the solution is there, because its effect is obviously strong. On reveal, +1 max energy permanently, but you have to somehow get rid of it, or you can only play 1 card each turn, which sort of by turn 6, it renders that +1 energy sort of useless. So playing Electro with Lockjaw again is a pretty good combo. Electro with Viper, Electro with Carnage, anything like that, but again, it's sort of like by the time you've played Electro on turn 3 and then other card to get rid of it on turn 4, or played like Lockjaw on turn 3 and then played this on turn 4, you only have 2 turns to take advantage of the 1 extra energy, and it isn't game winning. And I've tried so many times with Electro and I've not managed to find a way to make it consistently strong. I think Electro should cost 2. I think Electro should be 2 energy, maybe even 1 power. Like, sure, decrease the power. It's not really relevant, but I do think that Electro should be cheaper, and players need to get more of a chance to actually take advantage of its effect, because at the moment, playing Electro, removing Electro, like it just takes so much time. In fact, making it cost 2 would actually also make it not too powerful with Lockjaw, which would be good. Like, it would have to be Electro into Viper or Electro into Carnage. So, yeah, I think that the buffing Electro, making it cost 2, and maybe even decreasing its power to bring that in line would be really good. Rhino's a little weak, and I'm only saying that because it's one of the few cards that changes the location, the others being Scarlet Witch, Storm, and Magic. But the thing is about Rhino is it's sort of not good. like Scarlet Witch has the same power, but is cheaper. And yes, replacing this location with a random new one can have a downside to it, but it can also have an upside. Whereas Rhino is it's just sort of boring, right? Just sure, ruin this location, move it. The only reason you'd ever run Rhino is if you wanted to run like several different cards that ruin locations for some reason. Maybe in Cerebro 3 or something, you'd play this and Scarlet Witch. And also Magic. And also Storm. Wait, no, Storm's got 2 power, right? Yeah, so Rhino could do with a buff. I think Rhino just needs an extra power or something. Some reason to... Because its effect in itself isn't actually that like insane strong. So bringing its power up to be more in line with what's sort of expected from that energy cost, that would be a pretty good buff, I think. Thor is pretty strong when you play it with Lockjaw. I hear people complaining about Thor, but Thor with Lockjaw is quite strong. See, a lot of the cards in Marvel Snap that seem pretty weak, you have to actually think about it and be like, well, you know, is it still weak when combined with the correct cards? Because if it's not weak when combined with certain cards, you don't want to buff it because then it would be too broken with those certain cards. Wong is extremely strong, but again, I think that the Enchantress change that I suggested earlier would help Wong out a lot. Ghost Rider used to be completely busted when it cost 3, and now it costs 4. It doesn't seem to see that much play at all, so that was a really good nerf. Shang-Chi is very strong. Shang-Chi, I heard that Shang-Chi and Killmonger are considered the 2 most hated cards in Marvel Snap. I don't think Killmonger can be changed really, because I think having that ability to destroy 1-drops is vital for the sort of back and forth and the interaction sort of in Marvel Snap. And I feel like Shang-Chi is similar. I don't believe that the game would function as well if there's no way to destroy your opponent's big things and no reason to not play big things. You know, this isn't like Hearthstone where you can compare Shang-Chi to Big Game Hunter in Hearthstone, right? And Big Game Hunter was sort of considered the fun killer of the game. In Hearthstone, you've got spells that can destroy big minions, right? But like in Marvel Snap, you don't have anything like that. So Shang-Chi is sort of your best option. That being said, maybe a nerf to Shang-Chi would be change its text to on reveal, destroy all cards at this location that have 9 or more power, including your own cards at this location. That way, you won't get this like Black Panther standoff where you've both got Black Panther and it's like, well, if one of you has Shang-Chi, then you're gonna win because the Shang-Chi will then blow up your own Black Panther too. So I think changing it to destroy all cards at this location that have 9 or more power is something that they could consider for Shang-Chi. Otherwise, I think that its effect is fine and good though. I believe that Drax needs to change just because it seems really bad and really boring. Maybe it's just the case that Drax, there's no deck that it fits into nicely just yet. But again, I've never seen Drax played effectively in Marvel Snap. It has the same ability as all of the other Guardians of the Galaxy. If your opponent played a card here, gain power. Maybe it just needs to gain more power. I think there could be like a bigger reward for playing Drax in the same location as an enemy card. And it's a difficult one because Gamora is 7 and gains 5 power, right? So it goes up to 12. This goes up to 8. You don't want this to be as powerful as Gamora, but I think it should be comparable. And, you know, it goes up to 8 at the high end. That's 4 power less than Gamora. You know, I feel like I'm talking myself out of this. Maybe it should just be a 4-5. Maybe it should just be 4 energy and 5 power, and it goes up to 9 if you manage to hit the correct lane, which wouldn't be a huge buff. Either way, unfortunately, anyone opening Drax in pool 3 is going to be like, oh, this card's boring. I've seen this before. And that's just the way that it is. If anything, maybe the best change to Drax is move it down into pool 2 or pool 1. Because, yeah, it's just disappointing for people in pool 3. Enchantress, I've told you, I suggest that the buff on Enchantress is make this an ongoing effect instead of an on-reveal effect. Remove the abilities of all ongoing cards at this location, like, permanently. I think that could really help slow down onslaught mystique things. A lot of these cards are balanced pretty well. Rock Slide is one of those cards that I don't really know how I'd change it. I just think its effect is sort of disappointing. Maybe it needs to have 7 power or something. It just needs to be that little bit stronger to make it really worth putting in the deck. Because again, if you're playing Rock Slide on turn 4, your opponent is getting 2 rocks, but they only have 2 chances to draw those rocks. So I don't know how impactful that really is. I agree with the people that have said that Crossbones could do with a slight buff. I just think maybe I seem to be saying a lot of the 4-cost cards need a buff. I don't know, like 8 power isn't that much, right? It's the same as a Drax that hits correctly, which maybe that is okay. I don't know. Again, I just shift its power up very slightly. Put it up to 9 or something. Just give it that oomph so that when you play it, it's like, yeah, okay, this was a big swing in my favor. Again, a lot of these cards are fine, like, and they have their uses, even if they're a little niche. Like, Leech is extremely strong with Professor X. Leech is particularly strong with Lockjaw. Magic is a heck of a lot weaker than she used to be when you could actually play her on turn 6, but she was also too strong back then. Now she feels slightly too weak. Maybe I'd consider making her a 4-cast card, because being able to play Magic a turn sooner would once again sort of re-enable those consistent games where you can play Magic early and then you've got your 5, 6, and 7 energy turns to play big things. That would be quite a big buff though, making Magic cost 4. Again, I wouldn't be against dropping her power to you know, even that out a little bit, but she's right now she feels unplayable, I think, in most decks, and that's a shame, because the card, I mean, she was so powerful before. I've also split her so many times I want to use her. Professor X, a lot of people have been complaining about Professor X being too strong. I don't really see it. Professor X is only strong specifically when combined with Daredevil, and typically only really played in Destroyer decks, which is, I think, okay for me. Destroyer decks are very good, but like they're not completely dominating, and they are counterable. You know, if you can Shang-Chi the lane where they're going to play the Destroyer, which doesn't tend to be that hard to predict, this deck can be countered. So I don't know that I agree that Professor X needs a nerf. And Black Panther, I really thought would need a nerf when it first came out, but I don't agree with that anymore either. Black Panther is so easy to counter, and if the card gets too dominant, you know, with Black Panther and Zola and Wong, if those cards get too dominant, people just start putting Cosmo in their deck and Shang-Chi's and shutting Black Panther down. So I really don't think that this card needs a nerf after all. Sarah is very strong, but I don't know how you nerf her without her becoming unplayable. Maybe reduce her power down from 5 to 4 or 3 so that, you know, it really is a big investment. If I'm playing Sarah, I'm spending a lot of energy and I'm not really getting any power out. So my next turn has to be big to make up for that. I think maybe that's potentially a good nerf for her. Black Bolt just sucks. But it's also a difficult card to balance, because making your opponent discard a card can feel very bad for them. So you kind of don't want this card to be too powerful. But this card sucks. Like, 8 power just is not much for a 5-cost card. Again, compare that to Gamora, who, yeah, you're playing it, but like you're probably playing it and she's probably getting up to 12 power. So maybe shifting him up to 9 would help. Or maybe your opponent must discard the 2 lowest cost cards in their hand. Because again, typically you've got to remember, when you're playing Black Bolt, typically your opponent is going to be playing their highest cost card on the following turn anyway. So maybe having Black Bolt discard 2 cards instead, it punishes them if they have almost emptied their hand and then they have to top deck. Or maybe that would be too strong. I don't know. Black Bolt could do with a slight shift though, I think. And Onslaught I've talked about. I really do think that changing Enchantress slightly would fix a lot of the problems with these decks. Destroyer, I think, is, while it is extremely strong, again, as I say, I think it's counterable, so I don't think it's the end of the world. And Death, I think, used to be a lot stronger than it is now, but it doesn't seem to see anywhere near as much play. I wouldn't bother changing her too much either. Have I missed anything that is obscenely broken? I don't think I have. Mr. Negative's in a pretty good place right now. I suppose Arrow is the other card to look at. Arrow used to be quite a bit weaker than she is now. I think she used to be, what, She used to be, was it 6 power? They buffed her up to 8 power for 5 when with quite a strong effect. I guess if arrows can genuinely consider too strong, and she is considered quite strong, if she really is considered too strong, you could consider knocking her down to 7 power again. But like, I don't think that this card is too busted. I think that she's okay for now. I think that arrow is the kind of card that we should be, it's cause for concern. It's worth watching her. But I think she's okay for now. Generally, I think that the game is super balanced. I wouldn't mind seeing more buffs than the ones that I've pointed out. What I want to see more than anything is new cards. I'd love to see Galactus and Thanos properly added to the game. I don't know when that's coming, but I really hope it's coming soon. I don't believe that Pool 4 will be added to the game until players that got Marvel Snap on release are generally starting to finish Pool 3. I think that would be the ideal time to dump Pool 4 into the game. But I do think new cards would go a long way to help. And I really do think my number one change genuinely would be changing Enchantress and making it so that she has an ongoing effect and that future ongoing cards in this location don't activate either. I think that would be better than where she's at now. And I think that would be a good counter to Onslaught, because then you can essentially prevent your opponent from playing Onslaught in a certain lane. And, you know, if your opponent started filling up other lanes with like shockers and squirrels and whatever, and the thing, because they're playing a no ability deck, then you can preemptively Enchantress their empty location. And I think that would be a really worthwhile change. But yeah, that is all for today. Let me know what you thought of my nerfs and buff suggestions. Let me know if you disagree. Let me know if you think I missed anything. I would love to hear about it. And I will see you in the next one.